Well, hello there, and welcome back to the very latest episode of my Love Machine podcast. Now, in the world of dating, there are certain language patterns that tend to be effective in helping to create a connection with somebody. By understanding and utilising these patterns effectively, you can increase your chances of success in dating and relationships. And this is so important that you know how to use this. Otherwise, saying and doing the wrong things on your date is going to lead to failure. So thank you so much for the wonderful guest I've got today to help talk about these interesting language patterns. It's the wonderful Adelaide Goodeve. Now, Adelaide is an elite performance coach working with the world's best companies, leaders, teams, and athletes. She coaches them on their mental skills to become the very best versions of themselves and attain elite performance. Adelaide, how are you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. That was an amazing introduction as well.
Was it good? Did you enjoy that?
I did. It was very nice.
It sounds good on my new radio mic. For those listening, I've got a new microphone, and you may have heard it on some of the recent podcasts. So, Adelaide, can you tell everybody about yourself and how you help people?
My journey started as a performance coach in a very unconventional way. So from my late teens into early 20s, I suffered from severe chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME. For those who don't know what that is when you are deeply tired and this fatigue is in your bones. So it's not like when maybe you've partied too hard, you're hungover the next day and you're feeling quite groggy and a bit fatigued. It's when no matter how many hours you sleep, no matter how many hours you rest, you are always so tired that even things like walking downstairs or brushing your teeth is like climbing Mount Everest. For me, it ended up being confined to my bedroom, moving back home. And chronic fatigue, it's weird. It affects people in different ways. So I have very like hyper aware senses. So light, normal conversation, it was very hard for me and my body. What's also strange is they don't know what causes this. And they also don't have a pill or a real protocol that you can follow in which you're guaranteed to recover. So doctors told me when I was 21 that I would have this for the rest of my life. It's going to get worse and good luck.
Wow.
And for me, I was like, wait, what? Like, you're the top specialist and that's the advice? Like, this is like, my life cannot be over. So I started to delve into various different ways you can heal the body, because I thought it was to do with the body. That's where I was feeling the symptoms. And it was bizarre. In 1 week, about 4 years later, I had a lot of people come to me and they're like, hey, have you done the lightning process? And I was like, no, what is the lightning process? And it's a 3-day brain training seminar in which you're taught how to rewire your brain. I fully recovered in 3 days. I went from not being able to, or barely being able to walk, to suddenly being able to do CrossFit, to go on like a 10-mile walk with my parents in the countryside. And this is because your brain is plastic. So they used to think it was hardwired, like an electric circuit. So once those neural pathways were laid down, that was it. You couldn't change them. But it's so far from the truth. Your brain is very changeable. It's called neuroplasticity, and it's your brain's ability to grow, change, and develop as a result of how you use it. And it's a bit like Google Maps. You know, you log into Google, you say, hey, I want to get to this location, and it gives you some route options. Some of them are on like an M25, and they're really strong neural pathways, and they get you to your destination in a really quick and great time. Whereas others are more like country roads and dirt roads, and they just take you a while to get there. But the more you travel those roads, the usually better they become. They can become super highways. And again, those super highways, they can become those gravel roads. And this is how your brain works. So you have this response, and it just depends what kind of neuropathway is it using to get there. And it could be a helpful response or an unhelpful response. And I was taught, and I train my clients, how can we turn these superhighways that use unhelpful response in really quick and great ways to become those dirt roads. So they become weaker and weaker and harder to activate. So you can sit and respond and think and feel and act in ways of an elite performer, in the ways of a champion, in a far easier and quicker way. Where in those old stuff that you used to that's no longer helping you, we weaken and weaken those neural pathways so they become things that actually you don't even do anymore.
That's incredible. And you achieved that in 3 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, for me, I was like, I was reading the science a little bit about it before, and I was like, it makes sense. but at the same time, like 3 days. And it was 3 days. I was like mind blown. And then I decided a year after that, went traveling, lived around the world, worked around the world, had the best time hiking in Nepal, working on a cattle station in Australia, teaching, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And then I decided, you know, when I was sick, I was reading about Rich Roll, who's an ultra endurance plant powered athlete. And he transformed his life and started doing Ironmans. And I was like, that's, for me, that was like the pinnacle of, you know, what health and fitness would be like. That'd be like, yes, like chronic fatigue is done. And so then I started doing Ironmans as well.
Blimey. So you're completely cured now?
Yeah. So for me, and how I, like my map of the world and how I teach my clients is that we do stuff. So we do our feelings, and we can do like physical symptoms and responses to stuff. Yeah. And we don't, like the unhelpful stuff, like I didn't mean to do chronic fatigue syndrome. My body and brain, it just got stuck doing something unhelpful. It was an accident. There's no one at fault, no one at blame. It just happened. So my body is no longer doing chronic fatigue syndrome. If I'm in a high stress situation, you can feel that that's the way the brain wants to go. But I just have these strategies I now use in order for it not to ever go there. But everyone has different responses in stressful situations and over stressful times, and that can be my body's kind of go-to one. But I just ensure that you catch it early. You again, your brain's a muscle, so you're always training and exercising the brain in a really great way to make sure that I'm always doing the feelings that I would like to be doing.
I've got it. So what you've done, you've hacked your brain, and you now teach people how to hack their brains to overcome these issues, to become the ultimate version of themselves. Yes. So that's a summary of what you do, which is absolutely incredible. And I agree with you. I think that's so possible. The brain can be programmed any way that you want to program it. And I do that a lot with my clients. I work with them to get better relationships, tell themselves a better story. Because people tell themselves utter nonsense all day long, don't they? And I can see if you're telling yourself nonsense, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that will drain you, that will make you ill. And many of my clients come to me with this stress, or they've got this problems in their brains that can be fixed by just, it's not about being more positive, but it's about thinking and acting in different ways. So to tie this into our subject today, which is about language patterns in relationships, it's a really important thing to remember that the way that we tell people our stories and the way we communicate also can change your brain, can't it? It can change the way we interact. So can you tell me, you mentioned to me when we had a little pre-session yesterday about your strange people you've been dating yourself, which made you want to discuss this topic with me. Can you tell me about that quickly now? I said we save it for now.
That was so funny. So I knew this guy for 5 years, and a really awesome guy. I moved back to the UK from Norway, and we started going for walks every weekend because I'm a very active person. That's what I like to do, cycling. And I was like, it's really great. We went skiing on a holiday together. And so then we started dating. And just stuff started to come up. Like, I'm a very independent person. I mean, I'm a performance coach. I feel I know my own mind. I know my own body, striving to be the best version of myself all the time. And I suddenly found myself potentially being delivered after 2.5 months of dating, an ultimatum. 2.5 months. And it was, I don't want to have children. I've been very clear with this up front. It's just not for me. And I'm sat down out of the blue, and he's like, okay, I've thought about this a lot. I want to have 2-3 children in 2 years' time, and I want to live in Hampshire. And I was like, wow, I'm very side-blinded. And my main concern was like, well, I don't want to live in Hampshire. That was my first thought. And he's like, well, we'd have to. And I was like, okay. And then the crazy thing is that I've been, like, children have just not been for me since I can remember. And especially when I was then sick, I just don't want to go through anything similar again. So I'm very upfront whenever I date someone. Like, this is, especially if they're older than me, it's like, this is my situation. This is what I want, how I want to live my life. So getting on the same page already to make sure it is going to work. We share the same values, same outlook. But then I started to question that maybe I would have a child, which was absolutely crazy. But when you look back in the relationship, weird stuff comes up that, if you look at isolated, it was like you could put it down to like an odd comment or something that's strange. But when you suddenly put all those instances together, you're suddenly like, wow, this is interesting. I wasn't being the person who I usually am, being that strong, independent person. I wasn't like, I was being led maybe down the road to ways that wouldn't have been my best life or the best version of me. And it's not saying that I still like, he has very many awesome qualities, just wasn't the person for me. But it was very interesting that you can suddenly be in these situations. You can do it in relationships or outside, where you're kind of in warm water to begin with, and it just like slowly heats up. And because it's changing so gradually over time and it's quite subtle, you may not realize it until you get delivered an ultimatum or a different kind of strong message.
I love how the ultimate turn-off for you was the fact you didn't want to live in Hampshire, rather than questioning the fact you wanted to have children or not.
I know.
What is wrong with Hampshire?
Back, I was like, that was the biggest red flag for me. That should have been the first thing that was like, no, like this is not going to work. Not, yeah, I'll think about it for 2 weeks and not talk to you, because that was the rules. I was like, what was I thinking?
And didn't you say to me as well that he had conditions while you thought about whether to make this work or not?
Yeah, so I had to think about this for 2 weeks. And I was not allowed to talk to him for those 2 weeks. So again, red flag there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he wrote you a letter?
And then I got a letter, yes. When I said that we have nothing to talk about, I then got a handwritten letter 2 weeks later, which was also very funny, because it was like full of like, hey, you're this wonderful person. We should have been honest from the beginning, which I was. And then it, so what I learned, and you can correct me on this, is when someone has these controlling tendencies, the exes tend to be crazy for various different reasons. Yeah. But you'll know far better than me than this. But every ex was crazy in a different way. So then I got pegged into a hole for questioning things. So I question everything. So then I was crazy in that way, and I was like, oh, that's a good thing to be crazy about. But I was like, that was interesting.
Yeah, being curious about the world is not a crazy thing. That's good.
Yeah, you've got to be curious and ask questions and be like, is this like, why is this happening, or why is this being presented to me in this way? That's how my brain works as well. So I was like, oh, that's fine, but I was still a wonderful person, despite having those flaws, which was a nice thing to be told.
Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? So you're imperfect. Did you respond to this letter?
No, I put it in recycling.
Good. I would have burned it or flushed it down the loo. It's the same thing.
I know. When I put it in recycling, the next I was like, damn, I wish I'd burned it.
Burning it's a good way of getting closure. I recommend that a lot of people. And have you heard from him since?
No, I have not. No.
Good. Stay away. Stay away from losers like that. But there you go. Even me saying that, using the word loser, is probably a bad choice of words, isn't it? Because maybe he's not a loser. Maybe he's just mixed up or confused in that way.
I think so. I mean, he's got so many great qualities. I don't think I'd be the person, obviously I'm not the person for him. But you have conversations. You don't deliver ultimatums when you're going out with someone. And like with language, it's like, well, you got to think, how would I like to be communicated to and communicated with, and the words you use to create an outcome that you would be ideal for both parties. So I'm not quite sure what was going through the mind when he thought it'd be a good idea to have an ultimatum.
I think all he needs to do now is go onto Tinder and select 2 options. Maybe not on Tinder, because Tinder can't do this, but maybe something like Hinge or Bumble, and select the parameters for anyone within 20 miles of Hampshire who wants to have children. Life sorted, problem solved, isn't it? That's it, as far as he's concerned. That's all he needs to do. And then talk to those people and not talk to anybody else, and he'll live happily ever after.
Yeah, so it's true. I do like the parameters on Hinge.
Yes, I do. Because you haven't got the parameters on things like Tinder. You can't search. All you can search on is location and age on Tinder. So you can't do that. But you can search for location. If he's in Hampshire already, perfect. Or set his choice to that. But putting him aside now, because he's completely irrelevant to our conversation and irrelevant to your life now, he's gone. Tell me about the sort of mistakes people make in the language patterns they use when they are interacting with people for the first time.
Great. So when we go back to neuroplasticity and how the brain programs and wires itself, and where we get stuck and where we thrive, it comes down to the words we use. They are the architecture and structure of the reality we create around us. And bring it back to ourselves. In order to have a great relationship with others, we need to have a wonderful relationship with ourselves. And you might find, as you said, we tell ourselves stories, and often these stories create unhelpful are using unhelpful words and unhelpful language that keep us stuck. And what's interesting is when someone says, like, they might come to me and say, like, hey, I'm really stressed. It's like, great, well, how would you love to feel instead? Well, I don't want to feel stressed. Now, here the problem lies is that when we use our words, every time we say a feeling like stress, anxiety, self-doubt, the brain activates that neuropathway. The more you use those words, the more that neuropathway is strengthened. Remember, your brain is a muscle, and it doesn't differentiate between what is useful to you and not. It only differentiates between what do you train the most. So if your language and your self-talk and your story is around anything unhelpful, stress, anxiety, self-doubt, those are the neuropathways you're training the most, you're strengthening the most, and they're the ones that are more easily activated. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to feel more confident, and if you want to feel more self-love and all those wonderful things, you need to be using that language. Now, where people don't realize is when I ask them, well, how would you love to feel instead? And they go, well, I don't want to feel stressed. Your brain doesn't hear not. It still hears stress. And it's still activating and strengthening the neuropathway for stress. It's a bit like right now, if I ask your listeners, do not think of Einstein riding a purple donkey with green spots. Guaranteed, you're all thinking a version of that image or video. And that's because your brain is getting prepared to not think about something. And in order to not think about it, has to first understand, what do you not want to think about? So when we think, how would I love to feel? How would I love to be on this first date? You have to be using helpful life or relationship enhancing language. I want to feel confident and calm. I want to feel sexy. I want to feel hot. I'm going to be talking in a really great and brilliant way. I'm going to be interesting and excited. I'm going to listen to what they're saying and respond. And I'm going to be show up as like my best version. What does that look like and feel like for you? And using that powerful language. Because if you're turning up or even thinking about the date and you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm nervous. Well, nervous is okay if you're using it in a good way. But if you're thinking like, oh, I'm like, it's not going to go very well. They're not going to like me. They're going to think I'm ugly. I'm not going to be funny. I'm going to sound really boring. You are activating and strengthening those neuro pathways. So they are more likely to be in your reality. So you really, when you're thinking about how you're showing up for the date in life, and when you're thinking about how you want certain situations to go, you have to be using that helpful, powerful performance or life and relationship enhancing language. And I'm so glad you brought up earlier, like, it's not about being positive, because everyone says like, oh, you got to have that positive mindset. It's really about that helpful mindset. What is helping you right now? Because the world is not black and white. It's not positive and negative. There's a whole variety of colors out there and feelings and thoughts that can be helpful and not helpful to you. And you want to be thinking, what do I need to think and feel on this date? That's going to help me show up as my best self. And if you show up as your best self and it doesn't, maybe there's not a second date, you still showed up as your best self. And that's what counts.
That's so true. Ultimately, the brain can't tell the difference between real and imagined events. No. So if you tell yourself a load of rubbish, it's going to believe it. And the more times you tell yourself this, the more time it's going to become true. And that's how you can mess things up. Another side to this as well, when it comes to language patterns, is how someone will portray you and someone will think about the things that you say. So one of the first exercises I do with clients about first dates, I say to them, well, how has your day been? And they'll say, well, it's been okay. My boss was really mean to me. I was really tired. My train was late. They're going to hear negativity. They're going to hear these words and assume, for all the information they have on you, that you're a negative person who gets quite tired, who isn't particularly happy, and they're going to read that from you. So just as much as what you say, the way you tell yourself this, someone's going to react to that as well. Do you agree with me?
100%. I love that you brought that up completely. And you can actually, as well as what you're saying, putting it the other way, is like when you ask the question and someone else answers in that way, you can start to gather what kind of person they are, where their mindset is, how do they edit their reality. Because if you are telling yourself, or someone's telling themselves, a lot of unhelpful stories, and that's where their neural pathways are the strongest, then actually your brain is like, oh, like they're stressed out at their work. That's interesting. And the brain is now going to edit your reality for that to be more true and for that to really be all you see, because consciously you're able to process 5% of that information. Yeah. And 95% is unconscious. So your brain is really helping you to navigate reality, to navigate your life, and it's going to show you the stuff that it thinks you want to see. So definitely you want to be answering in ways that, you know, make you sound really exciting and really great, but also that has to be authentic for yourself as well.
I completely agree. And I see this a lot in dating profiles as well. People write negative or they write really terrible things in their profiles. Have you seen some of those things? For example, the most common one that I mentioned on the podcast is no time wasters, please. Don't bother contacting me if blah, 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 blah. So that's only going to attract time wasters and people that are going to be unsuitable for you. Have you seen things like that before?
I have, yes. I actually, so I've, you can waste so much time on these apps now. So I tend to only, when people like you on Hinge, they like you, and then you can see who's liked you. Mm-hmm. So I tend to look at them, and majority, I'd say 99% of the people, I'm just like, nope. Yeah. Because you're already put off. It's like, they're like, or even knowing what you like, what you want out of life. Because a lot, I'm very active, and a lot of people like, my ideal Sunday is like going for a walk and a pub lunch. I'm like, that's it. Yeah.
They all write that.
Like, what else is there? And then you see the pictures as well, which reflect what they say. I actually have on mine, so I actually changed it a little bit. So kind of the opposite reframing, because I got fed up with people who were matching with me who weren't what I wanted at all. So then on mine, I'm like, I think I have something like, hey, I am like, it's not like please apply, but it's like please swipe if you are adventurous, you are fit, and you love to spend time like running, cycling, swimming outside the majority of the time. So I've got like, this is very clear. And I have people like, wow, I love your profile. Like, I feel I match you because I also love X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. I love that. It's forming a connection with somebody, because people don't use their profiles in the right way. They just write rubbish in there to try and fill the space, or they complain about things, or write very, very generic statements. But doing what you've just done is exactly what I advise to people. Sell yourself, talk about what you're looking for. If someone wants to be part of that, they will connect with you. Job done. Easy. Yeah. Easy.
What I find the funniest actually is the new voice note option in Hinge.
Yes.
And they go like, hi, my name's Jack. And you're like,
we know that.
And already, like, even the tone of voice, you got the words that you say, and then the tone of the voice also makes a difference to how you feel and how the other person's feeling. You're like, wow, you sound so bored doing this. Or it's just like a massive silent gap, and they go, hey. And you're like, are you trying to form a connection with someone?
It's interesting you should mention this. This is very much on topic of the podcast. It's still to do with language patterns. This is important because this voice notes feature is a very new feature and something everyone asks me about when they are signing up. Because the first thing they ask you to do once you've done the profile and done the pictures is enter a voice note. And everyone goes, oh no, goodness me, what do I do now? What do I write? What do I say? Sorry, I should say in that sense. And it is something that I am learning as a coach, trying to work out the most effective way to present yourself. And I think just being upbeat, being friendly, and saying something relatively interesting and amusing with lots of energy is the right way. Yeah. And I know that if I was doing it, and I'm not, luckily I haven't been single for 15 years now, but if I was doing it, I'd be over the top. I would do something really stupid, like some impressions or something, just to show my personality over it. Or I'd use my radio voice and start doing that. Because that used to work really well on Match.com. Do my hypnotherapy voice. But what do you think someone should say?
Well, so for me, I said it's like, because I don't do impressions or anything like that. My accents are terrible. I just sound the same. So I have the humor side I cannot play to. But one of the questions you can choose in there is like, what's the biggest risk you've taken? So I was like, hey, the biggest risk I've taken is I moved to Norway, didn't know anyone. I just wanted to live in the country, moved to the tiniest town you can imagine, and just started having adventures. And like, what's the biggest risk you've taken? And then I have a lot of people like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, I've been to Norway, used to live in Norway. I would like to go to Norway. And they're like, the biggest risk I've taken is X, Y, and Z. So you get a conversation starting that's more interesting than like, hey, what's up?
I've
Or
heard some terrible
hi.
messages, terrible ones on there. It's
Oh,
just,
some of them I actually enjoy listening to them because they're so bad.
they are, but it's something people can improve on. If you're doing that and make a really, really good voice note, then the first thing they're going to think about you is think this person's really interesting, and they're going to want to connect with you. I think what you're saying there is right. Ask a question as well. Get the conversation going.
Yeah.
It's much easier to do that if you just ask a question. Then it makes it, the whole thing about Hinge that I like, it's supposed to be about conversation starters and prompts. So it's a voice prompt rather than a voice note. So say something that's going to prompt a conversation in the same way you would. You wouldn't walk up to someone and just say, hi, how's your day? That's very dull. Say something nice, pay a compliment, whatever it might be. And I think even doing messages, you can send messages rather than voice messages rather than text messages on there as well. So if you do
Yeah.
that can work. Has
I'm
anyone
all
done
for
that to
voice
you?
messaging. Yeah, I love voice messaging.
Yeah.
Because you get a feel for the person. But also with all my clients, I voice message because I find texting to be a bit of a pain. So I'm always voice messaging everyone. But you get the emotion comes out of it. You kind of get a feel of like what moods are they in more of the time. Is their voice appealing to you? Because that matters as well. And I like it. You just get more conversation kind of going. You can visualize, am I going to be able to have a conversation with someone? And also some boys are really good at texting and they are not good at conversation skills when you're in person. Maybe they get nervous or something else. You're like, wow, we just had this like great conversation on text, but now you're not saying anything.
Because there's time to think about it when they're texting. And in real life conversation, you've got to think on the spot and be natural. That's why.
Interesting, yeah.
There's a lot of things you could be doing with that. I think voice notes. I personally don't like using voice notes on WhatsApp and Instagram, but I've started to use it, and it does help me get more responses and more clients by using that. If someone happens to message me a question, I will voice note it and I will send it to them. And I think this person's real. He's taking his time out to do that. But that's not to do with dating. It's human connections. I think the human voice is very powerful if you use it effectively. But back to our topic again of positive language patterns. What sort of things could people be saying then to themselves and to each other?
Love that. So the number one powerful question you can ask myself, and my clients, when they first start coaching with me, they're like, can't be that easy. I'm like, it's this easy, is asking yourself, catch yourself. When you say something, a thought, ask yourself, is this helping me live my best life? And just that one question is now going to help you guide your actions, your thoughts, and your feelings to living your best life, to being your best self on a day-to-day basis. Because so much of we're going on autopilot, you're going through the motions, you don't realize what you're thinking and feeling. And then we get to the end of the day and you're like, actually, I think I didn't have a very good day, or I feel really stressed still. But if you'd caught that thought at the very beginning and the feeling at the very beginning, you'd have been able to have changed it. Because once you've asked yourself the question, actually, am I thinking or feeling in a really helpful way that's helping me live my best life? Yes, awesome. Like, do more of that. If the answer is no, how can I change that now? And it could be going outside for a minute. It could be making a cup of tea, going for coffee, texting a friend. Everyone thinks when we change our life, it's the big stuff that changes. So moving house and going on holiday. And yes, they are great, they will change your life. But it's the small 1% daily changes which have that compound change effect. And they are going to be the things that can transform your life if you're improving by 1% every day, it's an over 3,000% improvement in a year. So that 1% is so important and it's so doable as well. So that's why I always recommend is asking yourself, is this thought, feeling helping me live my best life? Yes or no? How can I change that so I'm now thinking and feeling in a better way?
I love that. I do that myself. I find myself saying one thing a lot. And when I do it, I criticize myself and I think I shouldn't do that. But I always say, oh, I can't afford that. Or I say, oh, no, that's too much. I can't afford that. I don't want to spend money on that. I tell myself I can't afford things. This is small things, maybe a coffee or something like that. Of course I can afford to buy a coffee. I'm very lucky that I can do that. I'm very blessed in my life that I can afford to buy a coffee if I want to get a coffee. Telling myself this stupid little thing and it becomes part of your language, doesn't it? Oh, I can't afford that. Oh, that's too expensive. That's what I do. And I'm only saying this now, not to draw attention to the fact that I can afford to buy a coffee or not, because many people can't nowadays, and I appreciate that. It's the fact that I'm as imperfect as everybody else is, even though I'm a coach. And we've all got things we need to learn and improve upon. Because like you said, if you improve 1% every day, that's a massive transformation towards the end of it. But you mentioned something there about little things you can do. I'd like to ask you that question as well, about your daily rituals. Are there certain things that you do every day? Any sort of routines or things that you like to do?
I knew you were going to ask me this. I was dreading this question. So I'm going to pre-frame my answer because
Just say no at the same time.
I really have, so at the moment I literally have nothing.
Right.
And the reason that is because 4 months ago. So then I had the whole breakup. So every morning I'd be waking up at 5:30, 5:45. At 6 o'clock, I am working out. Now, back in March, and that's been my routine for years, but back in March, I dislocated my shoulder.
Right.
And suddenly, you can't exercise. I could kind of cycle, but that was pretty much all I could do. And even then, it was a bit painful. So then I was like, well, training, like that one cornerstone habit that set me up for the day is like gone. And then other stuff had happened. Then I had an operation, and then then there was the operation, and then you can't do anything for 6 weeks. And I've been on holiday for 3 weeks, and now I've come back. So the stuff that was like really hinged on training this year's been very interesting because it's not been there. And I'm all for morning routines. But at the same time, sometimes we feel we should have a very powerful morning routine. We should be like, 5 a.m. club, like get up at 5, like go for the hour, reading, whatever it may be. So for me, I felt so guilty and so awful for not being able to train. And I was just being tired, and I was like, it just isn't. So I decided actually not to have a morning routine. So still wake up. What am I excited about today? What am I looking forward to about today? And I'd have the tasks I had to do, but I just went purely on what do I feel like doing this morning? Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to play with my dog? Do I just want to start working again? Do I want to read? And so I had myself like an hour of leeway in which I could just fill that time with things that filled me with joy. So there was no guilt attached or no shame attached for not having these rituals, which as a performance coach, you should, in air quotes, have. So at the moment, no. But that is now changing moving forward because I can finally get back to training. And as it's Ironman training, you have to do at least 1 to 2 hours a day. And I like to do that in the morning, get it out the way. And then I'm like set up for the rest of the day. I'm super productive. So it's been a very interesting 6 months for me in where I've had a very solid routine for years. And that just kind of went out the window.
I think ultimately what I loved that you said there was that do things that fill you with joy. That's what life should be about. If you happen to like a routine, then do a routine if it makes you happy. If you're doing it because you feel you should, then no. But if it's not serving you, get rid of it. I think some degree of routine can be good. Gives you some structure if you want to.
I teach my clients about routine. I'm like, you have to have a morning one.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't really have one anymore.
I don't really. I've got little kids that wake me up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m, depending on what happens. My routine is looking after them in the morning. Yeah. And getting on with it. And probably having a coffee, have some breakfast, that's a routine. But then I do all the things that we always do, the gratitude list in my head and things I have to look forward to and my to-do list. But ultimately, I'm lucky I can choose my own schedule. Like you, if I want to put myself out and go for a morning, walking around the park, I can do that. But do things that fill you with joy because that's what life's about. And that will come across and you're telling yourselves good stories then because you've got things to look forward to. And since I'm tying this in now to the subject again so I can round up. Is that quite good? Right, yeah, you're nodding in there. Agreement, wonderful. So brilliant. So this is what it's all about. Tell yourself good stuff, do good stuff, and you can live a wonderful, elite, transformative life. So Adelaide, thank you so much. If someone wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so if you're looking for mainly brain hacks, then I am on LinkedIn, Adelaide Goodeve. If you're looking for behind the scenes of what a sports psychologist does, then or an elite performance coach, then I'm on Instagram and dare I say TikTok. At the moment, I'm just bombarding everyone with Arctic photos and videos. So if that's your thing, definitely go check it out. But that's where I hang out online. And I also have a website, which is adelaidegoodeve.com.
Fantastic. Hopefully my listeners will check you out and see what you're up to and check out your Arctic pictures.
Yeah.
And the polar bears. Any pictures of the polar bears on there?
I did one today, actually. So we the polar bear like crossing the glacier, digging a hole, sitting in his hole like, hey, I'm chilling here. What are you up to? And then doing some bear yoga before chasing off a younger polar bear.
Bear yoga. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
Brilliant. I will check that out today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a privilege. I could talk to you for a long, long time, but I better let you go and get on with your day. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespreece.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.